Good morning, Gene.
Hey, Gary, how you doing this morning?
Very well. Good to have you on because I was thinking about you yesterday, and that's, of course, why I got in touch with you to be on the show, because I was thinking, well, in a couple of days, everybody's going to be focused on this quarterback competition at Alabama. The Tide does not have a guy that's returning that has played very much at all. Bateman's got the only live game experience, started one game, played a little bit, none of the rest have ever seen the field. It reminds me a lot of 1984 when you were a highly touted freshman signee from Blytheville, Arkansas. Mike Shula wasn't yet Mike Shula. In fact, he had played very little in 1983 behind Walter Lewis. Probably shouldn't have played at all. Perkins burned the red shirt on him. Vince Sutton was in. Paul Fields was still around. And you came into the mix. Now, you wound up, I think, redshirting, Gene, but in that fall camp, you were told that you would have a chance to compete for the starting job. Am I correct?
That's true, and we had a battle, and even though I went through the spring, and I tell people this all the time, the spring is great for getting you highlighted at, hey, this guy can do this receiver can do that, but unless you come back in the summer and really, really work hard and then perform in the fall scrimmages, the spring really doesn't matter. I mean, if you come in and you're a great offensive lineman and you work hard, you do great in the spring, you're offensive lineman of the spring, and then over the summer you put on 20 pounds, it can just defeat everything you did. So everything kind of came down to the fall camp. And, I just think for me at that time, I'd spent, maybe too much time working on my physical tools and not enough time just learning what every single person on offense did, learning more about the defenses. And so when it came around, things were not speeding up for me like they should have, and, from the spring to the fall. So, ended up, being on the sidelines and, learning for that first year. But the fall camp it's extremely hard. It's grueling physically and mentally, and that's something those guys, especially the freshmen, are about to go through.
You mentioned something, Gene, that was rare. Now, we see it all the time now, and we saw it this year with Jalen Hurts. But when you enrolled early and went through spring in 1984, that was pretty uncommon.
It was, and I was told at the time I was the first person in the SEC to ever do it. So it was difficult, and I think they're doing it differently now. But when I was a freshman, I went through the spring, and I was not allowed to go through. There was a full week where the freshmen came in the fall and practiced by themselves. Because I went through the spring, I wasn't allowed to do that, so I came in with upperclassmen.
That's right, yeah.
That's now I think they're integrating everybody in.
Yeah, there's no freshman practices anymore.
Right. So that was another thing that I didn't get to go through that, the other freshmen. And it's every time you can get reps in practice, it's helpful.
Yeah. In fact, I missed the freshman practices. I always thought that was a lot of fun to see them out there by themselves, and they got much more attention than they do now. Thinking back, and that wasn't the end of your quarterback battles, but in 1984, as I said, Mike Shula was mainly known as being Don Shula's son. He wasn't that highly recruited quarterback out of high school. Had played, just a few snaps in 1983. Vince Sutton had a lot of had a lot of hype. You had a lot of hype. But I know Paul Fields had been around, had come in under Bryant, and really felt like that was going to be his job. In fact, I know Paul Fields feels like that he was misled by Ray Perkins. What's your recollection of what happened with Paul Fields that year?
I'll tell you, it's tough in that, when you get these younger guys coming in, I think coaches, if they it's almost like the NFL guys you hear. If you got two guys that are battling for the job and the guy that's, got a $5 million contract, if he's, if they're even, they want to go with the other guy. They want to go with the guy they're paying the money to. And I think Coach Perkins kind of looked at it. If Vince and I were just even with Paul, and everything that we were doing, that he wanted to go with the younger guys and try to work for the future. And that's one part of football that's difficult because I was on the other end of that. At the end of my career, my junior, senior year, like I just wanted to play. And when you work really hard for 4 years or 5 years, and then all of a sudden, some freshman comes in and kind of takes your spot, it's difficult because you feel like, you earn the right to play. And I know it was really hard for Paul, but, like we say at Alabama, you win with class and lose with class, but you also go through your life with class. And he was great about it. He was helpful.
Class act,
but it was very difficult for him.
Yeah, and we're going to get to what's happening right now, but this is just a great reference point because you have been through it. So 1984, you wind up redshirting. The quarterback duties, quite frankly, that year were back and forth between Sutton and Shula, although I think Shula toward the end, obviously in the Iron Bowl, kind of established himself, but still Alabama had its first losing record in 25 years. So you come right back in the spring of 85 and the fall of 85, and you're battling for that job again against Shula and Sutton. What do you recall from that year?
Well, that was probably the year that things just didn't work out the way that I thought they would, because I actually had a really good fall camp, in 84, even though I wasn't playing. You'd go on a scout team against Cornelius Bennett and all these first-team guys that are just stars and really, doing well and lighting it up. And again, I started out the spring basically right behind Mike at second string. And just, again, it was just more the mental part of it that, nowadays you see all these kids going to Elite 11 camps, and they're learning stuff that we knew, probably in 10th, 11th grade, stuff that we were learning as sophomores in college. They're already integrated into it. And I just, like I said, I just relied too much on my physical skills. And I know I drove Coach Perkins crazy, too, and he would say all the time, just because you're completing some of the throws because of arm strength and things like that, there's still the reads that you have to go through. And, I probably drove him crazy a lot. And it ends up, because I didn't do some of those mental things, you end up holding a clipboard. And it's hard to swallow, but you can't go back and relive it. It's what happened, and you just kind of have to learn to accept it over time. And that's why at the end of my career, I was like, I just want to get on the field and play. And I was willing to, I was ready to play holder. I would have done anything. So it was difficult. It was very difficult. And then, Vince he went through some of the same things, Vince Sutton, where, he played a lot of that freshman year and then really didn't get to play a whole lot more. And then actually redshirted without an injury. I want to say it was like his junior year, which that's very unheard of as well. So it was tough. It was very tough.
Yeah, that's what's so unique about the quarterback position at a high-profile school like Alabama. Today's hot ticket is quickly yesterday's news. You lived it. I mean, you came in with all the accolades, as I said, could have gone to just about anywhere. Tennessee and Arkansas were beating down your door. You come to Alabama, you're the hot guy, and then you don't get on the field, and the next thing you know, it's 1986, and they're signing Billy Ray and Jeff Dunn and Gary Hollingsworth. And out of those three, of course, Hollingsworth became the guy, and he was the least touted. So it never ends. And now you see it with the quarterback situation here. I mean, last year, Blake Barnett was brought in, all the hype. A lot of people said he'll get on the field as a true freshman. He got redshirted. He's got Cornwell, who came in the year before with all the hype. Cooper Bateman. Now Jalen Hurts is the true freshman. Talk about these four guys, what it's like to compete in that environment, and what do you think is going to play out in the fall? Is it going to be Bateman with his experience, or is it going to be with these young guys that just overwhelm the coaches with their physical skills?
Well, and before I go into that, let me say this too. We've had other quarterbacks too that they've signed that have come in here and where we end up having 5 or 6 guys and have transferred.
That's right.
So we didn't really have that transfer deal, but these 4 guys are the guys that have stuck with it. And it's kind of fell into place where, Jalen Hurts is a true freshman, Blake's a redshirt, Cornwell's a sophomore, and Cooper's a junior. So you kind of got things spread out, and we've got, supposed to be another, Elite 11 star coming in next year. But, Cooper is a guy that, kind of reminds me of me in one way, in that he just wants to play. So when the coaching staff came to him and said, hey, look, we don't feel like that you're, going to play quarterback right now. So he said, hey, I'll move to receiver. I just want to get on the field. He's the holder. So I know that Cooper Bateman has got to have the respect of some of those guys on the team for how hard he's worked, plus how he's sacrificed. He hadn't put himself first. He put the team first. And I don't know what, to me, Cornwell's kind of the wild card. I don't know what happened last year with him.
I think he got in the doghouse somehow, yeah.
Yeah, some doghouse issues. So, he may be the most talented of everybody. He may not be the best runner, but as far as just dropping back and letting it go and just throwing a really nice ball, he may be the best we have. And then, Jalen Hurts, I watched him in the spring, not just the spring game, but in both the scrimmages. First scrimmage was a little bit rough, but that second scrimmage, he looked spectacular. I mean, he was going against some second teams, some very good players, making plays with his legs, spinning out, and making throws, and looked very, exciting for his future. And then, of course, Blake Barnett, I think Blake's just in a situation where he just has to cut down mistakes. that's it with him. I think it's kind of like me with Coach Perkins. When you're running down the field, you make a 50-yard run. If you fumble at the end of it, you've ruined all that goodwill you had on the 50-yard run. And I think Blake had a lot of turnovers in the spring, and until he cuts those down, I don't think he can be the guy. But if he does, let's say, like I said, he did that in the spring. If he has a great fall camp, those 2 scrimmages, and they track all your throws, he has a chance to be the guy as well. But I think Cooper being, the guys with a little bit of experience, he's actually played in some, the Ole Miss game was a big game, whether he got pulled or not. He knows what it feels like. He's your safe bet to start the season, and we'll just see how the scrimmages go.
You talk about battling and persevering and what you went through here, and you hung in, and then, as you said, when Coach Curry got here, you asked to be moved so you could play. You got on the field, had a game-winning catch as a tight end against Kentucky. We don't see as much of that. And, I'm already hearing rumors that if so-and-so quarterback doesn't win the job, he's going to transfer. Patience is something that these kids, and I'm not just saying the kids, I think a lot of time it's their families, they're the dads and the quote-unquote quarterback gurus that, but if you're patient, sometimes things will come to you. A perfect example are the last 2 quarterbacks at Alabama, Blake Sims and Jake Coker. Look how long they waited for their turn, but yet you see so much impatience. Gene, is that a product of all of these camps and all of the hype and all of these ratings that it seems like 25, 30 years ago, quarterbacks were willing to wait their turn, not so much anymore?
Well, I think back when I was there in the 80s, I think it just nobody was playing as a freshman, so you almost expected, okay, if I sign here, it's probably going to be, maybe my junior year before I have a chance to start. And mentally you were almost accepting it because that's just the way it was. And as you said, now these guys, they're looking for a spot, okay, where can I go and fit into a system and start now, and they want it now. And everyone that you see interviewed, they're saying the same thing. But you look at a guy like Blake Sims. I remember going to watch Blake Sims. He had 70 yards rushing at Ole Miss, a couple of years before he started. He's not even playing quarterback. And a guy that waited his turn, he kept working hard. And I think the thing that kind of took him over the top that last year was he worked really hard, and the teammates respected him, and they said, this is a guy we want to play for. And maybe they dove harder for a catch, or maybe they worked harder in practice, but he earned the job that way. And then, of course, we were in the same exact situation last year. Who's going to be the quarterback? We went all the way to Ole Miss to make a final decision. So I don't think Alabama's in any kind of emergency mode, like, we need to know first day. It may go all the way up to the week of the USC game prep before they even decide who's going to step on the field. And, heck, who knows? We may end up doing 2 guys. I don't know. It just depends, how these guys come back from the summer.
Former Crimson Tide quarterback and tight end Gene Newberry, our guest here on the Gary Harris Show, talking Alabama quarterbacks. Listening to what you said earlier, I know you have a feeling because of Bateman's experience that gives him the edge going into fall camp. I agree. He's the only one that's played, as you said. But as you also said from your own playing experience, fall camp can change a lot of perceptions of what happened in the spring. When this thing plays out, Gene, I'm just asking you for opinion. You watch it differently than we do. As a former player, you're watching the quarterbacks a completely different way. What's your gut? Who do you think takes that first snap against the Trojans on September the 3rd?
I just feel like, from what I've heard, that Cooper worked really hard this summer. I think he actually went and saw, quarterback coach and somebody that, helped him physically and do some things. I think it was maybe one of the same guys that, worked with Tom Brady. And, I think he would have to just really, really perform very poorly to not have a chance at the job. He'd have to just do some really bad things. So, USC is going to be a very tough opening game. There's going to be a lot of nerves, and like I said, we both thought he's been there. So I just think day one it's a safe bet. I don't think he would get us beat, and hopefully he's done some things over the summer. Since last year, that maybe he's ready to take that next step. I think the only thing he was lacking was possibly just getting the ball past those intermediate throws. He's fouling the short throws, maybe the intermediate, but getting the ball down the field. You got Darius Stewart, Calvin Ridley, O.J. Howard. You got a guy coming in, Garrett Dieter, a transfer that's already on the Blitnikoff list. That's almost unheard of. Mm-hmm. So we've got guys that can get open. And so all he's got to do is just, get the ball to him and just not make mistakes. Know where you're going with it, let it go, and I think, ultimately he can be the guy. But, it just like I said, the wild card, you just never know. Blake may come in or Cornwell and just throw 4 touchdowns in the first scrimmage. Then you got to say, well, wait a minute, what do we have here? It's kind of just hard to predict. You just never know.
How much do you trust Saban and Kiffin with their track record to figure it out, and regardless of who it is, get the right guy in there?
Well, I think Lane Kiffin's already shown what a tremendous coach he is to take Blake Sims, and basically he changed the way that he calls offensive plays that entire season. And, we were, throwing for as many yards as they've thrown in school history. And then last year, here we have a Heisman Trophy tailback, and Jake still had some huge throws, and he really kind of took him from the Ole Miss game and just steadily increased until the Michigan State game. He was lighting it up as a passer, and of course, he's in an NFL camp. So, Coach Saban is probably the best, for sure in the business right now, and maybe the best ever. We'll see soon on that. But Coach Kiffin, he deserves a ton of credit, and whoever the quarterback is, whether it's, Cooper's got great legs, Jalen is a great runner. I think Blake's a really good runner. Davis more of a pocket passer, but whoever he goes with, he's going to integrate that guy's talent into the offense and the play calling. So, you may see Cooper last year, maybe he wouldn't have run as much this year. He may integrate that in there, and people aren't going to expect it. And I understand Kiffin is just a tremendous coach doing that.
Talking quarterbacks with former Crimson Tide signal caller Gene Newberry. Speaking of Bateman, because I'm with you. I think he's a top-notch kid. I think he's a team guy. I think he's a good athlete. And you mentioned that Kiffin's going to customize the offense to his quarterback. But the one thing that Blake Sims and Coker both did was throw the deep ball, and that's a big part of what Kiffin likes to do. Yeah, he'll dump it off, he'll run it, he'll dump it off, then all of a sudden he'll go over the top. I know you have heard the same thing I've heard, that Cooper just can't throw the deep ball. Now, I'm not out there at practice every day, but I've been told that by people that I respect and trust. How big of a negative is that for Cooper Bateman if he struggles to throw the football over the top down the field with all these receivers that Alabama has on the roster?
Well, it could be a huge negative, especially if you get down in games. But, as I was saying, Coach Saban's not the best in the business for no reason. And this year's defense is going to be really good. So this may not be a team where we're playing, 30 games like that. It may be more in the, 17-10 type games. So I think if he can prove early on that he can move the team down the field, whether it's not, throwing deep balls and just dumping the ball off and using these great receivers and letting them run with it. And if we put points on the board, that may be enough. It's just, you just never know. It's kind of like the Ole Miss game. You never know what your quarterback's going to do when you're down by 19 points. And you get thrown in the mix and say, hey, we've got to win this game. And I know on the SEC Network, they still show the Ole Miss game from last year, and I'm sitting there watching it, still feeling like we can come back and win the game. It's unbelievable. So hopefully, Cooper learned from last year, and maybe he's really worked hard this summer. And you don't have to throw the ball 70, 80 yards in the air to throw a deep ball. There's windows you can throw it into. And so, I'm hoping that he can come back and then have a complete game. But I feel like at this point, for us to be successful, I just think head-wise, he's probably going to be the best bet because he's had the pressure. I know he knows the offense. He knows the personnel who to try to get it to. And he's also dealt with Coach Kiffin and Coach Saban. I can promise you he's been yelled at. So he's kind of been through that as well. Like, hey, you got to toughen up. Forget that play. Let's go to the next.
Going to wrap it up with Gene Newberry here in just a moment. When you were here as a player, Coach Perkins was, of course, taking over, transitioning from Coach Bryant, trying to get this program to a championship level. He bailed, of course, after the 86 season. But in 85 and 86, you guys were really close. 85, you had a 2-point loss at Penn State, a very heartbreaking 2-point loss at home in Birmingham to Tennessee, then the tie with LSU in Baton Rouge. And in 86, of course, the Penn State loss, the most disappointing. But you guys were so close, but you couldn't get over the hump. And now you look at Saban finding ways to win those kind of games every year, it seems. How amazed are you, Gene, when you watch this guy work and knowing how competitive it is in the SEC, to not just get close or not just win one year, but do it year after year?
Well, I mean, Gary, you said the exact word I was fixing to use was competitive. You know, we had a competitive league. I think we were a lot more top-heavy then than they are now. I mean, now you got Tennessee, Florida, you got LSU, Arkansas, all these teams. You know, when they play outside the SEC, you see how good they are. Well, when they play within the SEC, somebody's got to have losses. So, you're sitting there looking. Alabama has. We're playing LSU. We're playing Arkansas. So somebody's got to lose. So your overall record, not everybody can be 13-1, 14-1. And if you look at what Coach Saban has done since he came in, to lose to Louisiana Monroe, like I remember that day, and I know he still remembers that day. It was like, oh my, like what has happened? And to go from that point to winning all these national championships, and even when we didn't win the national championship 2 years ago, we were still in the playoffs. I mean, it's there's been nothing like it. I don't know if you can even compare it back to the 60s and the 70s, what went on. Because I'm telling you that even this year, the competitiveness of the entire country, the ACC, how good Clemson's going to be, Oklahoma, Michigan, all the Notre Dame, all these super teams, and still Coach Saban gets these guys to come back, not be complacent, and play at the same level year after year after year. That's where he is just the master. Because if you win a national championship, just automatically most kids are going to come back and say, we won it. We can just kind of show up. Well, our guys don't think that way. I mean, their programs are like, you're going to work your butt off in the summer, and you know what? This is a whole new team. We're starting all over again.
Enjoyed it, Gene. It's going to be a fun fall camp, and the chase for 17 is on, and at some point you just keep crossing your fingers and saying, I think it's going to end, but maybe it won't. But I don't see it anytime soon with the way Saban is coaching and recruiting. It should be a fun year and interesting quarterback race. Thanks for the insight, Gene.
Hey, I appreciate you having me on, Gary. I always enjoy it.